It started with a summons to the galactic Concord. Earth, now a full-fledged member of the interstellar community, had been tasked with hosting its first major diplomatic event. The news had sent bureaucrats and politicians scrambling, but for one man it was an opportunity. Martin Keller, a food scientist and amateur grilling enthusiast, was chosen to organize the culinary showcase for humanity. Martin wasn't the obvious choice. He wasn't a chef, nor a politician, but his unique blend of charm and curiosity about alien physiology earned him a spot on the team. The fact that he kept a grill in his garage didn't hurt either. And so, when the sci-fi delegation arrived, towering insectoid beings who communicated in clicks and bioluminescent flashes, Martin was the first to greet them. The sci-fi, led by envoy Zilak, were joined by the brachlori, gelatinous entities who preferred to hover in their nutrient-rich containment fields, and the amarans, a feline-like race with sharp features and sharper tongues. Humanity had spared no expense to impress them, transforming a United Nations courtyard into a picturesque banquet hall complete with fountains, holographic lights, and tables laden with Earth's culinary creations. Martin stood near the grill station, nervously adjusting his apron. The official menu was a carefully curated list of dishes deemed safe and palatable for alien physiology. Nutritional compatibility had been meticulously calculated. Yet despite these efforts, no one seemed to be eating. "Is it customary to let the food decay before consumption?" Zilak asked, his clicking voice translated into a stilted approximation of English. "Not at all," Martin said quickly, waving a hand. "It's all fresh, just waiting for the right moment." "That moment has passed," Zilak stated, his mandibles twitching with disdain. The brachlori ambassador, whose gelatinous mass pulsated with faint blue hues, released a low gurgle that the translator rendered as, "This banquet is inert." The Amaran delegate, a sleek individual named Pelson, sniffed the air delicately. It lacked spirit. Do humans truly consider this an expression of culture? Martin felt his face flush. It wasn't the food, it was the atmosphere. The carefully plated appetizers, served cold and immaculate, felt sterile. There was no energy, no soul. He scanned the courtyard for inspiration, his eyes landing on his grill. It was a reckless idea, but desperation often bred brilliance. "Envoys, if you'll allow me," Martin said, removing his apron and heading for his grill station. "I think I have something that might change your mind." As the diplomats watched, Martin fired up the grill. The smell of smoke and sizzling fat filled the air, drawing curious glances. He began by tossing skewers of marinated vegetables and thin cuts of beef onto the flames. The hiss and crackle of juices hitting the coals seemed to ignite something primal. Pelson's ears twitched, and even Zilak tilted his head. "What is this ritual?" Zilak inquired, the glow of his antennae fluctuating with interest. "It's called barbecue," Martin said. "An old tradition. We cook food over an open flame to enhance the flavor." "You deliberately expose it to fire?" asked the brachlori ambassador, whose translator managed to convey both horror and fascination. "Exactly," Martin said with a grin. "It's not just about cooking. It's a celebration, a way to bring people together." The Amaran delegate prowled closer, his yellow eyes narrowing. "And this technique improves the food." "Why don't you find out?" Martin replied, handing him a freshly grilled skewer. Pelson sniffed it skeptically before taking a cautious bite. His tail froze mid-swish, and his eyes widened. This is extraordinary." Zilak extended a spindly limb. "We must also evaluate." Martin handed out portions to the remaining delegates, watching their reactions with a mix of pride and apprehension. The brachlori ambassador absorbed the offering into its gelatinous body, its color shifting to a radiant gold. Unprecedented, it burbled. As the delegates devoured their skewers, Martin began to relax. He swapped out ingredients, adding spices and experimenting with marinades. Soon, the alien diplomats were huddled around the grill, vying for the next serving. "This barbecue," Zilak declared, his luminescent patterns glowing brightly, "is a triumph." Martin laughed. "Wait until you try ribs." Though the event had started with tension, it ended with laughter and full stomachs. Martin found himself explaining the nuances of smoking meat, the importance of char, and the delicate balance of heat and seasoning. By the time the stars came out, the envoys were requesting recipes to take back to their home worlds. It wasn't just the food that won them over. It was the warmth of the flames, the camaraderie, and the unspoken bond that formed over shared meals. For the first time, the HFY, Berklori, and Imarans weren't just visiting Earth, they were experiencing it. As the last skewer was served, Zelak turned to Martin. "Humanity has surprised us today. Your methods are unconventional, but effective." Martin grinned. "That's kind of our thing." Zelak clicked thoughtfully. "We request more of this barbecue." "Seconds," Martin teased. "Guess you liked it after all." The Selfori envoy's glow brightened. "Indeed, but we must also acquire one of these grills." Martin chuckled, already picturing alien grill masters lighting up the stars. He had no idea how big this was about to get. The Berklori ambassador absorbed the offering into its gelatinous body, its color shifting to a deep amber, a sign of pleasure, according to the cultural brief Martin had skimmed earlier. The HFY delegation, initially wary, took their turns. Their mandibles crunched through the charred outer layer, and their bioluminescent signals pulsed in what Martin could only assume was excitement. Zelak clicked twice, his usual tone of diplomatic neutrality replaced with something more urgent. "This flavor. It is unique. It is not merely sustenance but an experience." Martin grinned. "That's the idea." The shift was almost immediate. Conversations picked up, laughter, albeit in various alien forms, drifted through the air, and the sterile formality of the evening melted away. The Amaran delegate, Pelson, had abandoned any pretense of restraint and was now expertly using his claws to grip a skewer, biting into the meat with undisguised enthusiasm. Martin wasn't just cooking anymore, he was commanding the event. He moved between the grill and the growing crowd, flipping cuts of meat, brushing on sauces, and explaining the finer points of barbecue culture. He described the slow-smoked traditions of the American South, the spice-laden fire pits of the Caribbean, and the elaborate, flame-seared feasts of East Asia. Every culture on Earth had some version of fire-cooked food, and now, so did the Galactic Concord. Pelson licked his whiskers clean and leaned in. "This technique, do all humans know of it?" "Most do," Martin said, "but everyone does it differently. Some use wood for flavor, some prefer charcoal or gas, some marinate for hours, some just toss it on and hope for the best. It's not just cooking, it's an art." The Berklori ambassador's form rippled, shifting to a golden hue. Art, a term denoting deep cultural significance. "Exactly," Martin said. He glanced at Zelak, who was carefully picking up another skewer. "Would you say this changes your perception of human cuisine?" Zelak chittered, an odd sound that Martin recognized as their equivalent of laughter. Human cuisine remains peculiar. But this, barbecue, is compelling. It awakens something primal. The Berklori ambassador vibrated. "May we request additional samples?" Martin turned to the grill, flipping another batch with a flourish. "You mean seconds?" "We mean many more than seconds," Zelak said, clicking his mandibles. "Your supply is sufficient, yes." Martin hesitated. The original banquet had been stocked with precise, pre-planned portions, delicate portions intended to be tasted, not devoured. But barbecue wasn't about precision. It was about abundance, about the joy of sharing food fresh off the fire. He had enough for a second round, maybe a third, but if this kept up, he'd run out. And then, inspiration struck. Martin grabbed his comm and opened a channel. "Hey, this is Keller. I need an emergency food delivery to the diplomatic banquet. Contact every local barbecue joint, yes, all of them. I don't care what style. Just get me meat, vegetables, anything that can go on a grill. Tell them it's for interstellar diplomacy." There was a pause. You want us to tell them it's for aliens?" "Yes," Martin said, "and tell them they're going to love it." Within the hour, the first trucks arrived. Barbecue restaurants from across the city had responded to the call, eager for the chance to introduce their specialties to intergalactic guests. Pitmasters arrived with slow-smoked briskets, racks of ribs glistening with sauce, and piles of charred, flame-kissed vegetables. The aroma alone was intoxicating. The moment the fresh batches hit the grill, the gathering transformed. The scifistories, previously reserved, were now clicking eagerly whenever new skewers were ready. The banquet pulsed in shifting hues, their colors moving in mesmerizing waves. Even Pelson, usually composed, had started pacing impatiently while waiting for his next serving. Zelak, the most disciplined of the group, finally gave in. "Human Martin, you must disclose the secrets of this preparation. Is it a guarded practice?" "Not at all," Martin said. "Barbecue is meant to be shared. I can teach you." The Sulfurian voice straightened. "Then we must learn." Martin paused. He had expected them to enjoy the meal, maybe even praise it, but this was something more. The Sulfuri weren't just appreciating barbecue, they were fascinated by it. "You want to learn how to cook it?" Zelak tapped his mandibles together. "We desire mastery." Martin scanned the group. The Brachlori ambassador undulated in agreement. The Amaran delegate, still licking sauce from his claws, flicked his tail in anticipation. This wasn't just a successful dinner. This was a movement. Martin wiped his hands on his apron, stepping back to take in the surreal scene. Alien diplomats, representatives of civilizations that had conquered the stars, now stood around him, eager students of one of Earth's oldest traditions. A grin spread across his face. "All right then, let's fire up the grill." The sight of alien diplomats huddled around a smoking grill was something Martin never expected to see in his lifetime. It wasn't just that they were interested, it was the intensity of their focus, the way they absorbed every detail of the process as if you were handing down sacred knowledge. Zelak, his usually rigid posture now more fluid with curiosity, observed as Martin adjusted the grill's vents. "You manipulate airflow to regulate heat." "Exactly," Martin said, flipping a steak. "Too much air, the fire burns too hot. Too little, and it smothers. The key is balance." Zelak extended a spindly limb toward the grill, stopping just short of the flames. Primitive, yet elegant. The Brachlori ambassador, who had taken on a rippling deep red hue, vibrated. "We wish to attempt." Martin nodded, stepping aside. "All right, let's start simple. Try flipping these." The gelatinous diplomat extended a pseudopod, which delicately wrapped around a pair of tongs. The motion was hesitant at first, then smoother as the Brachlori ambassador got the hang of it. With a graceful, fluid movement, the meat was turned. The ambassador pulsed with a color Martin's translator registered as pride. Zelak was next. He watched Martin demonstrate the proper way to baste meat, then mirrored the motion with surprising precision. The Sulfuri diplomat's mandibles clicked in satisfaction. "This is not as complex as I anticipated." Martin chuckled. "Give it time. You haven't tried smoking yet." Pelson, the Amaran delegate, who had been more interested in eating than cooking, finally spoke up, smoking his ears perked with intrigue. Martin led them to a separate setup, a slow smoker filled with racks of ribs, their surfaces darkened by hours of exposure to fragrant wood smoke. The moment he lifted the lid, a wave of scent billowed out, a heady mix of spice, char, and rich, rendered fat. Pelson's pupils dilated. This is different." Martin nodded. "Smoking takes patience. The meat cooks slowly over indirect heat, sometimes for an entire day. The smoke gives it flavor, breaks down the tough fibers, makes it tender." The Amaran leaned in, his tail twitching. "You mean to say this food is aged in fire?" "More or less." A deep silence followed. The assembled diplomats exchanged glances, then turned back to the smoker as if it contained the secrets of the universe. "This method," Zelak said slowly, "it is a form of controlled transformation." Martin rubbed the back of his neck. "I guess you could call it that." The Brachlori ambassador pulsed golden again. "This aligns with the philosophies of our own people." That caught Martin off guard. "Really?" The gelatinous form rippled. "Our species does not consume food in the same manner as yours. We absorb nutrients from our environment, breaking them down slowly over time. But this process of infusing sustenance with an external force before consuming it, this is familiar to us." Martin blinked. He'd expected curiosity, maybe even admiration, But this was something deeper. It was as if barbecue had touched on something fundamental, something that resonated across species. Pelson paced around the smoker, his gaze fixed on the ribs. And this patience, this anticipation, this is part of the experience. Martin crossed his arms. Some say the weight makes it taste better. The American bared his sharp teeth in what Martin had come to recognize as their version of a smile. Then I will wait. Zelak, however, was already thinking ahead. Human Martin, you have demonstrated the technique. Now we must apply it. Martin hesitated. You want to try smoking something? The exsulphori envoy's antennae pulsed. Correct. We must understand the process fully. Martin looked around. They had plenty of meat, but he had a feeling the aliens wanted to experiment with their own ingredients. All right, what do you have in mind? Zelak gestured to an aide, who scuttled forward carrying a case. When it was opened, Martin was met with an assortment of alien food strange, plant-like tendrils, gelatinous cubes, even something that resembled a giant insect larva. He swallowed. You sure these are safe to cook? The exsulphori's mandibles twitched. We will determine that together. Martin let out a breath. All right, let's see what happens. The next hour was a whirlwind of interstellar culinary experiments. The gelatinous cubes, when smoked, took on a rich, umami flavor that had the Brachlori ambassador vibrating with delight. The plant tendrils crisped up like earthly greens, with a smoky bite that the American compared favorably to their own seasonal delicacies. The insect larva, something Martin had been hesitant to touch, ended up caramelizing over the heat, developing a savory sweet crust that had the xulphori buzzing with excitement. More food arrived from Earth kitchens, and soon the banquet had turned into a full-blown cultural exchange. Human chefs swapped techniques with alien delegates, and the air filled with the scent of blended spices, wood smoke, and sizzling meat. The conversations grew animated, the formality of the diplomatic gathering dissolving into something more primal, more universal. Martin found himself standing back, watching the scene unfold. He had started the night worried about making a good impression. Now, he realized he had done something far more significant. He had given them a tradition. Zelak approached, his mandibles clicking thoughtfully. Human Martin. Martin turned. Yeah. The xulphori diplomat stood taller. We must discuss something of importance. Martin raised an eyebrow. All right, what's on your mind? Zelak glanced toward the gathering, where Imran and Brachlori alike were engaging in what could only be described as a feast. This event has shown us a truth. Martin frowned. And that is? The alien diplomat's antennae glowed softly. We must establish official interstellar barbecue relations. Martin stared. You're joking. Zelak's expression remained serious. We do not joke about matters of cultural significance. The Brachlori ambassador wobbled over. Our species must explore this further. If humans are willing, we propose a formal culinary exchange. Pelson, licking his claws clean, let out a satisfied sigh. I propose more food first, then discussions. Martin couldn't help but laugh. He had come into this evening expecting skepticism, maybe even resistance. Instead, he had found enthusiasm, camaraderie, and the beginnings of something he never thought possible. He clapped his hands together. All right then, let's fire up another round. The feast had long since transformed from a formal diplomatic event into something entirely different, a chaotic, joyous, smoky festival of flavor, culture, and unexpected camaraderie. The carefully planned banquet tables, once adorned with neatly arranged sample plates, were now covered in a haphazard spread of human and alien dishes, some charred, some beautifully grilled, and others the result of experimental enthusiasm gone slightly awry. Zelak, once rigid in his diplomatic stance, was now fully engaged in the process. His exsulphori aides stood beside him, each carefully handling skewers, their bioluminescent antennae pulsing in focused synchronization. The Brachlori ambassador had become particularly enamored with slow smoking, hovering over a pit that now held a gelatinous, alien delicacy that wobbled with each shift in heat. Pelson, the American delegate, had fully embraced the eating aspect. He had abandoned cutlery entirely, opting instead to grip slabs of smoked ribs with his claws, tearing into them with a level of enthusiasm that might have been alarming under other circumstances. This waiting, this tending to the fire, Pelson said between bites, licking sauce from his fur. It is a test of patience, but the reward. He paused, closing his eyes in pleasure before exhaling sharply. I did not expect to enjoy it so much. Martin stood back, taking it all in. The scene unfolding before him wasn't just a successful dinner, it was a moment in history. The first true intergalactic barbecue. And it wasn't just about food anymore. The Zelfori, Braclori, and Amaran had stopped treating this as a simple meal and started embracing it as a ritual. The act of tending to the fire, the slow transformation of ingredients, the shared experience of waiting for the perfect moment to eat it resonated with something deeper than biology or culture. Martin had spent years studying food science, nutrition, and culinary traditions, but he'd never expected something as humble as barbecue to bridge the gap between species. A soft chime rang from his communicator. It was the event coordinator from the United Nations, a very stressed-looking woman who had been responsible for ensuring the evening went smoothly. Martin, please tell me I'm not seeing what I think I'm seeing. Martin smirked. Depends. What do you think you're seeing? I see highly ranked alien diplomats with their hands appendages, covered in sauce, eating food that has not been pre-approved by the Culinary Safety Committee. And oh my God, is that Ambassador Zelak tending a grill. Martin turned to see Zelak carefully rotating a set of skewers, his usually pristine exoskeleton now slightly darkened from exposure to the heat. Yeah, that's happening. The coordinator pinched the bridge of her nose. Martin, do you have any idea how delicate this diplomatic event was supposed to be? I do, he said, watching as Pelson tossed a fresh batch of seasoned meat onto the flames with a delighted flick of his claws. But I think we overshot delicate and landed somewhere in groundbreaking. A long pause. And they're enjoying it. Martin turned back to see the Braclori ambassador vibrating happily as a slow-smoked gelatinous dish was pulled from the smoker, its exterior caramelized into a glossy perfection. The diplomat quivered with excitement before absorbing the entire thing into their body. Enjoying it is an understatement. The coordinator exhaled. All right, just keep things under control. I need to go explain to the Secretary General why this is no longer a formal event, but instead a planetary cookout. Martin chuckled and closed the call. Turning back to the growing crowd, he saw that more humans had arrived, chefs, pitmasters, even a few curious diplomats who had been attending other discussions but had caught wind of what was happening here. One of them, a French diplomat in an impeccable suit, approached cautiously. Is it true, he asked. The Zelfori are cooking. Martin nodded toward Zelak, who was currently explaining the finer points of heat management to one of his aides. The Frenchman adjusted his tie. Well, I suppose that means this is an officially sanctioned culinary exchange now. Martin grinned. Sure looks that way. The evening stretched on. More foods were introduced, more techniques shared. Someone had started playing music, nothing formal, just a casual strumming of a guitar, followed by an impromptu performance from an alien diplomat who produced sound by vibrating their entire body at different frequencies. Zelak approached Martin once again, his mandibles clicking in a pattern that the translator registered as thoughtful consideration. Human Martin. Martin wiped his hands on his apron. What's up, Zelak? The Zelfori envoy straightened. We have reached a decision. Martin arched an eyebrow. A decision? Zelak gestured toward the gathering. This barbecue. It is not merely sustenance. It is an event, a bonding ritual, an act of patience and collaboration. Martin nodded. That's about right. Zelak's antennae pulsed. It must be formalized. Martin blinked. I what? The Braclori ambassador quivered with agreement. This practice must be shared across species. It cannot remain confined to a single world. Pelson, still savoring his latest meal, flicked his tail. I second this. We must make this an interstellar tradition. Martin stared at them. You. Want to make barbecue an official part of intergalactic diplomacy? Zelek clicked affirmatively. It will foster unity. An event such as this encourages understanding, cooperation, and most importantly, flavor. Martin ran a hand through his hair. He had started the evening worried about whether or not the alien delegates would even tolerate Earth food, and now they were proposing barbecue as a means of strengthening interstellar relations. "You're serious?" he asked. The Brachlori ambassador pulsed a deep gold. "Completely." Martin let out a short laugh, shaking his head in disbelief. "All right, what do you propose?" Zelak's antennae flickered. "A structured exchange of techniques. Humans will teach, but we will also contribute. Our species has its own methods of preparing food that may be compatible with this practice." The Amaran delegate bared his teeth in a pleased expression. "And of course we must reconvene for future tastings." "Regularly." Martin chuckled. "You just want an excuse to eat more, don't you?" Pelson flicked his whiskers. "If it strengthens relations, it is a sacrifice I am willing to make." Martin shook his head with a grin. "All right then, welcome to the first ever intergalactic barbecue accord." A loud cheer composed of various alien sounds, hums, chittering, and even a few delighted vibrations erupted around him. The fire burned on, the smell of grilled food drifting up into the night sky, carrying with it the first true sign that humanity had found its place in the stars. And it smelled like barbecue.